What I wanted to do, I'll try and do it just for 15 minutes. I'm a bit of a rambler, so I'm going to really try and keep focused here, is talk a little bit about the topic, the dilemma of disruption. And I think it's a wonderful topic because it's very apropos for what's happening literally right now, and I think what will be happening in the next 20 to 30 years when you are all leading, as I said, and you're going to have a pretty tough environment to lead in. I'm an optimist, but it's going to be a very exciting time that you're leading in. I remember one of my clients in China telling me we were talking about all these amazing changes going on in technology, the economic power shift to Asia, all the new thinking in terms of even on economics and how you work, saying this 21st century is going to be probably one of the most exciting in human history. And he said to me, he goes, yeah, I agree with you, assuming we get through the first 20 years, right? And I think that's the kind of a bit of this, that's the dilemma that we're dealing with here. There's amazing amounts of changes that are going on in the disruption, but there's also a lot of negative sides to it that's affecting too, and you're going to be leading in that. So as I said, when I'm in my rocking chair looking back, and I hope you take care of old people like us, we're going to be counting on you to lead, because leadership is going to be in the essence. So what I wanted to say about this topic is the following. First is I think disruption is good. It's something that we as humans have experienced for tens of thousands of years. If you think about the revolutions, the agricultural revolution, and then the four industrial revolutions, they've all led to a much better way of life. You see it in a simple way in GDP growth, but I'd also argue in terms of just life. Larry Summers would say today that the average lower middle class American lives in better conditions than Rockefeller lived in 1903 in the US in terms of basic things like flushing toilets and food quality, and you could go on. So there's been incredible progress. But in these disruptions, there have always been people that have not benefited. There's always been people that have not benefited, people have been affected. But I think what's different about disruption now is it's happening so quickly, there's less time to adapt. And I think one of the biggest challenges is, can our society figure out a new system to be able to adapt? Because our society is based on models, I would argue, democracy, how our social safety nets that are at minimum 100 years old, that they're not fit for purpose, I believe. And one of the challenges as humans, we only tend to be able to do a reset when we go to war, when you literally obliterate everything, there's nothing left, you start again. I'm obviously exaggerating. That's kind of when we do a rethink that, well, maybe that system didn't work so well and we need to modify it. And I'm hoping, and I don't think we will have to go through a reset like that, but the magnitude of the reset in terms of how we take care of people to be able to adjust in the system, how we elect and select and motivate leaders in a society is going to have to change. There is no way, in my view, that in 30 years from now, I think we can see a similar system working today. And the problem with societal change is there's not, from a McKinsey point of view, there's not a client. I can't find someone and grab them and say, you need to change it, because it's all of us. And that's what I think is going to be the challenge. So that's the essence of what I wanted to talk about. Disruption is something that we've lived with for tens of thousands of years. It's helped us improve our quality of life in a dramatic way, and I think we'll continue to do that. But it's also meant people have lost, but there's been a system that's been able to absorb and help people move it through so that it generally helps all of humanity, right, through the system. I'm saying now we're at a bit of a crossroads. And the areas that I wanted to focus on were three disruptions in particular that I think you are going to have to grapple with. The first is on technology. And technology is not just about the internet. You could argue it's computers, coming in the late 1960s, the internet in the 1990s, artificial intelligence now, this quantum computing, you can look ahead. That's one aspect of technology change, and it sure has affected everything that we've done. But there are other technological changes going on as well in material science, the ability to store energy, the type of material you can use to build aircraft or cars or whatever are changing fundamentally in what we do. Biotech, I mean, the notion now, there are people that believe we can actually get the human body to live for 180 years. The technology is there for the human body to actually live. Now, you're going to have a lot of replacement parts, I'm afraid. It's not going to be original parts in your system. The problem right now is the brain. That we've not been able to, so there'll be a great body but no brain. We don't seem to be able to get the brain past sort of 100 to 110 years, right, and where it is. But there's a lot of, my view is don't hold back, because I think that's going to change as well in what we go through it. So this technology change is in every single part of our lives. And I would argue we're in chapter 1 of the 100-chapter book. That's actually a Larry Summers quote. We're early in the stages of where this is. And technology is transforming everything that we do. I think the biggest issue is the speed with which it's happening. If you think about the radio, it took 38 years to get 50 million people in the world to use a radio when it first came in. It was 13 years for the television to get 50 million. It was 1 year for Facebook, and it was about 3 months for Twitter, right, to go through it. And so the speed with which technology is being taken up is changing everything in where it is. And it's changing basic assumptions of how we do things. So again, when I did economics 30 years ago, the idea that you could set up a company with no assets and run it like an Airbnb I would have failed the exam. There was Dominic, you go back to your farm town where you grew up, because it doesn't make any sense. Well, I'm afraid it does now. You can build increasing returns to scale. It was seen as something that could be done, but we don't really see it in reality. Well, that's just happening in everyday life and everything that we look at. Winner take all. There's much more a winner take all world that's out there, where you have literally some companies in an industry that have 95 to 98% of the profit pool. That did not exist when I started at McKinsey, right? That wasn't in the playbook that we looked at. We knew there would be dominance, but never at that kind of scale. Hey, Felix. Yeah. So what we have to do when these technologies come in is it forces us to challenge orthodoxies. I would argue that economics professors are some of the toughest people to deal with in dealing with some of these changes. No disrespect to any of the economics professors in the system. But as we go through all of this, what we have to realize is that some other assumptions are changing too. It takes less people to produce the same amount of output as we did in the past. So the number of jobs that are being created for the GDP output is shrinking. We're seeing this with automation. Probably the biggest example is when you look in the United States at the big three in 1990 were the big auto companies, Ford, Chrysler, General Motors. And they had sales of about $650 billion. The big three today, as you know, are Google, Facebook, and Apple in the United States. They have sales of about $700 billion. The market cap of the Facebook, Apple's, and Google's is about 10 times what the market cap is of those three auto companies. And the number of employees, which is the more important thing, is about 1/10. There were about 1 million people that were employed in the auto companies, about 100,000 are employed. So it's a very different world. And so growth doesn't necessarily raise all boats, right, that everyone can participate. And with technology moving at the speed it is, we're going to see some people who are lucky to be going to the right schools, being trained. Maybe they have the resources to be able to continue training themselves. They're going to do very well. And those who are not will be left behind. And that's the challenge. That's why I think we're all awakening to that with Brexit and Trump, right? That's there. And people like me who are out of touch, had no real sense that Trump was going to win. Well, there are 50 million people that are upset. They're not participating in this world that we're just entering, let alone we see what's going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years. So technology is an area where there's going to be huge changes in every single industry. There is not a single industry, including, by the way, consulting, and we don't like to take our own medicine. We like to tell other people what to do. We are being disrupted, right, in what we do. Everyone's going to be disrupted. Agriculture, government, everyone. But the problem is that those organizations, and I look in the mirror when I say it, don't tend to move as fast as the market in where we are. The average lifetime of a company has gone from 90 years to 18 years. That's for big, successful companies on the S&P 500 over the last 70 years, right? So this is where the dilemma of disruption comes in, because there's going to be a lot of people that are not going to benefit, and they get angry, and we're going to see populism that rises. In large companies, it's very difficult for CEOs to make changes, because guess what? Most people don't like change. They don't, and especially successful companies. It's more difficult to make change in successful companies than unsuccessful ones. And I remember Walmart, talking to the CEO of Walmart in 2009. It was Mike Duke. And I asked him, what are the 3 things that you worry about the most or excited? And he said, technology was number 1. And I said, why is that? And he said, because 5% of my sales are being competed for with Amazon, and 40% of my products, people look on the internet before they come in. But at the time, every article you read in the business world about a successful company was Walmart. They dominated the retail. They were unbelievably successful, the benchmark on every dimension. And he said, I've got my telescope in my right eye, and I'm seeing problems on the horizon. But I can't convince my people that we've got a problem coming. And when I talked to the CEO, Doug McMillon, who's the new CEO of Walmart, about a year and a half ago, and asked him, what were the 3 things that you think about? He says, I wish we listened to Mike Duke, 7 years ago, and what's going on, just because of the speed. So disruption means people change. Most people don't like it. And that makes it difficult, and that's why you can have the negative get worse than the positive, if I'd say it. A second disruption, so technology is one that you are going to have to deal with in a major way, and it's going to accelerate. And I don't think our education, skilling, and social safety nets are ready to deal with the turnover that it's going to cause. We have to fix that. We have to work on it. It's going to be something that I'm interested, but I think you will need to be thinking about how we fix that to make sure it works. The second big shift is just a power shift that's going on. It's the shift to Asia. I didn't go to Asia because I thought it was strategically important. It was just a complete fluke. I went there because the region was desperate for leaders from McKinsey to go. No one wanted to go. It was like, why would I go there? There's more interesting things happening here. So I wanted to go where people wanted me, in a way. So I went there, but living there and seeing the transformation that's going on there, it's going to affect everyone's lives. Over half of the billion-dollar-plus companies in the world are going to be in Asia in the next 10 years. They're already on the horizon. And those companies, I don't want to stereotype them, they compete and they operate in different ways. They tend to focus much more on the long term. They have much more of a focus on growth, less on profitability or ROIC. They actually make decisions at about twice the speed that their developed market peers do, and they invest double amount than their developed market peers. So it's a different operating model we're going to have to learn about. And I would suggest, if there's one thing I might say, is I know a number of you probably come from Asia, but if you haven't spent time there, I would strongly urge you to do it. It doesn't mean you have to move there, but you need to understand how China, India, and Indonesia, in particular, in my view, are going to operate. I would also put Africa in that bucket. Africa is going to be a very important part of the global economy, and there are some countries in that region that are going to be extremely important. Nigeria. I always say this to people. There are more, if you are Nestle, you have to be focused on Nigeria. There are more babies born in Nigeria this year than all of Europe combined, right? So if you're interested in diapers, you better get over there because there's a lot of activity happening, right, in that side of it. If you think about East Africa and then Southern Africa, there is a lot going on, and it's not resources, it's actually a middle class that's urbanizing. And so what relationship do you have with Africa? And I think this is going to be disruptive for many Western companies, and again, I look at McKinsey with a mirror when I say that. I don't think we're moving fast enough to deal with the power shift that's going to occur in those economies. Some of our clients in China today, while everyone's worried about growth rates and so forth, are literally growing at 35% a year. They have been for the last 3 years, and they will be for the next. It's just the issue there is actually leadership. How do you grow enough leaders to be able to deal with it? There's huge demand. Indonesia, India, as I said, these are places we need to go. So that's a big disruption we need to think about. And the final one, then I'm going to shut up and sit down here, is actually the aging world. We are becoming a much more older population as a planet. And, you know, as I always say, as I get older, I think that's not a bad thing. It's probably good to have a few older people around. But I'll tell you something, older people are less productive. Okay, your GDP growth is going to be a lot lower because you're going to have a lot more people like me around that aren't working very hard, or need to work harder. And I hope you'll support us. but you know, the labor force is going to decline for most OECD countries. The only places in the world where that's not going to happen are places like Africa, India, Indonesia, right, where you've got very young populations. But for the most of the rest of the world, you have an aging demographic, and that will pound down the GDP growth. That's a disruption, because we're just used to, for the last 50 years, of having a natural growth rate. We've had more women entering the workforce. People have migrated to different places. We're seeing what the popularity is about migration and so forth right now on that side. That will affect severely productivity growth. And the other thing about older people is as I said, they cost a lot of money. Because 3/4 of healthcare costs for a human are typically absorbed in the last 3 to 4 years of a person's life. And our healthcare systems cannot afford to support the population that we will have in terms of the aged unless we do something radically different. The other thing I'd say, it's interesting, it's I think sad, if you look at the Brexit and the Trump votes, we're actually seeing an age split in terms of the vote. So you see older people are voting for the populists, and younger people are actually voting more for the globalization and so forth. If you looked at the last election in the US, if it was people under the age of 35 that made the decision, there would have only been 3 states that voted for Trump. It would have been a complete whitewash the other way. And the same in Brexit. You see, and that's a worry, because and you're seeing this in Japan. I don't know what that's going to be like, because at some point you may decide to put us in a place where we can't vote, or we shouldn't have anything to say, because I do find it odd that older people are making decisions for and that's going to be a problem. We've never had to do, but I'm telling you, it's going to be a disruption, because democracy is everyone gets the vote, but should older people have, this is a very controversial thing to say, should older people have the same vote as a younger person? I'm not so sure, if you're designing something for the future and where it is. So I'm going to stop there. I'm just trying to give 3 examples of where you are going to be seeing disruptions. There are many more. The technology one, I think, is the biggest one. You're going to see it certainly in this economic power shift, and you're going to see it with this aging side. And it's all happening together. And that's why I think these next 20 to 30 years are going to be some of the most exciting times in history. So thanks so much for listening. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Dominic, for this insightful speech. You gave us a nice overview about the disruptions happening the next 10, 20 years. And I have 3 categories of questions for you prepared. And I have the honor to start the Q&A, and then you all are invited to ask questions to Dominic. We reserved 50 minutes at least for you. And if I have the feeling my questions are boring, I hand over earlier to you, so I hope you jump in. My 3 categories of questions are first to disruption, 2 or 3. Second, about McKinsey as a corporation. And third, about you, your beliefs, your values, your convictions, Dominic. Starting with your speech and the dilemma of disruption, you mentioned a lot of things happening the next 20 years, and actually I envy those people here around that are, let's say, in the eye of the tornado, that can really create things also. And I think there are a lot of anxieties on the one hand, but I think there's also an element of this disruption. There are a lot of chances. So being a global leader, knowing all these countries and having insights to more or less all the industries, what would you advise those people here that have everything in front of them? Where should they build up a business? Where should they look into in more details to be successful?
Well, I would say a couple of things. There's at least two things I would suggest you think about. One is with this world we're entering into, I think the impact that one person can have has been magnified in an inordinate amount, right? At least what I feel, at least the time when I left school 30 years ago, you know, you had to work through large organizations to try and get things done. There was an established way of doing things. And I think now, you know, one person or a small group of people can actually have a massive impact. And I think that's the mindset I would actually have. Not to say everyone has their own, you know, goals or purpose, but I'm just saying if it's about having impact and building, I would be quite ambitious, very ambitious about what you want to do, because you can make a massive difference just with ideas, with challenging orthodoxies. And so that's one thing. I would just set quite a high bar. And I don't know of another place where there are better qualified people to do it. I mean, if it's not you, who's going to do it? And that's something I would be thinking about. Who is going to do this if it's not you guys in where it is? So I would be thinking very boldly about what you want to do. Don't try not to be linear or checkbox. I was, just maybe coming back to your third, I was too much that way. Like I have to, you know, I want to, you know, I want to be able to achieve this by this particular time, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to tick this box off. And you know what I mean by tick box, right? It's sort of just doing what's conventional, because that's what people expect. I would, if your instinct says, I think there's a real opportunity to try something, go for it in where it is and try it. There's a phrase, I don't know, from Napoleon that I always have loved, where he used to tell his generals, which is, go to where the gunfire is. And the reason I get inspired by that is kind of like that, go where the action is. That's where so think about the areas that you're interested. Where is the action? The action, by the way, may be in Uganda, right? Or it may be in a different sector that needs to be shifted. So have your radar up to think about where you can have the impact. I think there'll be a lot of opportunity in the public sector because we're going to need innovation. So it's be ambitious and look for where those opportunities are. But the other thing I would be saying is I think you have to have a sense of what's my role in society. I think we've had too much of a selfish model of I'm going to do my thing, I'm going to make it work, and the system will work. The problem is no one is caring enough about the system. So I think you need to have a dual lens and say, what is it that you're going to do? It doesn't have to be 90% of your time, but it has to be a chunk. What am I going to do to help make this system better, to move it? Because I don't know who's going to do that. No, I don't think our governments are doing a very good job right now in being able to figure that out. And so I would just have that dual lens.
Will McKinsey help to serve the system?
I sure hope so. I mean, we've been very focused on companies. I think 450 now that are running billion-dollar-plus companies. But we also have 50 people in cabinet roles, or 50 people so running NGOs. I think that's a very good. That's good. But also we need to do. So we're working on youth unemployment right now. We have a very big initiative. It's like the largest youth employment program in the world, which is all we've paid. It's voluntary. We've paid for it. And we're doing it in 5 countries, and what we're doing is trying to take people just with a high school degree, youth that don't have jobs, and in 3 weeks train them up and get them jobs. And we in a 3-week period can get people with just a high school education very good jobs and pay, and that's something I think. But that's it's a drop in the bucket in terms of the scale, and so we need to do more.
I see. I see. Thank you. Another question concerning disruption. I read an article, or I heard a speech of you where you said the death rate, and you just mentioned it, in the 30s was for the S&P 500 corporations about 90 years. So 90 years it took till they disappear. And in the meantime, it's 18 years. So this is this death rate. And you and McKinsey, you help organizations to adapt to these changes, right? And you focus on the structural things. And my question is also very often this disruption or these changes are suffering under a lack of psychological transformation. Because the people just don't buy the new structure, don't understand the new structure and the reason for it. What advice can you give us that people are psychological with us in this?
It's a really important area. I mean, as you said, in 1935, which wasn't a great time in the world to be on the S&P 500, right? It's the middle of the Depression. It was 90 years, and now it's 18. So you see, and by the way, it's McKinsey's 90th anniversary this year. So I worry. I look at that. I worry. What are we doing to keep?
And how old is Apple?
Yeah, what's that?
How old is Apple?
Apple, probably 25 years. I don't know, 30 years.
Pretty old. Huh?
Yeah, it's pretty old. I mean, it's pretty. But again, so the churn rate, I think, is something we all have to think about. As I said, people don't like it. And the only anecdote I'd just give you, in my 30 years in McKinsey, in the last 18 months, I've seen more complete business model redesign change. The number is more than all of the previous 28 years. It's just
amazing.
Everyone's doing. I mean, there's a client of ours in the U.S., a telecom company, that literally is taking, out of a $30 billion cost base, they're removing $22 billion of the cost base. I've never seen, and they're going to reinvest 2/3 of it in new businesses, right? But it's just like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just a complete flip, right, of what's happening. And that's happening a lot, right? But as you said, the challenge is no one likes that stuff, right? The CEO may like it, or investors may like it, but for people saying, you mean I've got to change from doing this to that? And what I think I think it's a number of things. One is the mindset that this, by the way, not only are we going to change once, we're going to have to change multiple times. So we got to get used to it. It's like a muscle, like a mindset. We're going to have to change again, probably in 5 years. And the trick, I think, is not to say, I'm going to exchange my people. Because the traditional way a company does this is say, I'm going to fire everyone and I'll start and rehire. And that's not a very good way to do it from a disruption point of view. If you want a stable society, you can't do that. And that's why one of my heroes in this is actually Randall Stephenson from AT&T. He is the most hardcore capitalist you could find, shareholder value, but he's also someone who said, of my 260,000 workers, 60,000 will not be able to do the jobs that we're going to need in the next 5 years because of technology changes. But instead of saying, therefore, I'm doing a firing and I'm going to restructure, he said, he created an education program for employees with Georgia Tech, Uda City, some internet, and designed a program so employees could retrain. He would pay for it, you get certified, and he said, if you do it, you stay, but I'll pay for it. And that's a very magnanimous thing to do for a hardcore, if you say, capitalist. And that's what I think we're going to have to do. And the mindset of that CEO is different, and that's where the mindset has to be, we're all going to be okay, but we're going to have to do something very different. And that's a leap of faith. And so you probably could tell me how to do that better. But I think that's where you got to get into people's heads that there actually is a future. It's going to be different. And here's how we're going to get there. And because fear is what I think is the biggest bottleneck. Fear. I may not be here. And when we're dealing with the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people we're talking about, that's a problem.
Right. Everybody wants change, but nobody wants to change.
Yeah, exactly.
And
we like to tell other people to change.
Exactly.
That's what we as I think we love, you need to, I always tell Fila, the Swiss office, we could do X, Y, and Z, but don't tell me what to do, because I don't like to hear about it. That's our style.
That's human, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch to the second part of my questions about McKinsey's and the corporation itself. Dominic, we know that every year you receive about 235,000 applications. 235,000 applications. And you only hire 2,500. So for those of you who are calculating, it's about 1 out of 100 gets a job at McKinsey. And I tell you a personal story, huh?
This is the
a long time ago.
I want to take notes on this one. Okay,
I actually take all my courage, and I put together a CV, and I applied for a job at McKinsey, and to be honest, I not even get an invitation for an interview. That was hard. That was a setback. But it is.
It's good we share these things.
Yeah,
I
it's good.
Like this.
I get rid of my trauma by talking to you. It's a kind of a therapy. Yeah. But no, that was really hard, and I'm wondering, because I know a lot of the students here, and they really admire McKinsey, and there are also some criticisms, of course, as you know. Yep. But a lot of people admire them, and you take 1 out of 100, and I know there's a very strict selection process, and don't you think you lose through this strict selection process the biggest potential out there?
Yeah. It's a tough question. Well, you're very clearly an example of that.
No.
So
no, probably.
But no, we do. I think we it's that type 1, type 2 error, and I think we're, just to give you now we get about 400.
Perhaps you explain briefly type A, type.
Type 1. Is what we're looking for. We have a very sort of focused way of what we're looking for, and what you do by definition is you miss out on people who actually would have the talent, but they don't fit the criteria. They may not have all of the skills that are needed. They may not have had the background. When I joined McKinsey, I came in as a non-MBA, which if there wasn't a very strong support system for people like me, there's no way I would have made it, because I didn't speak the language. I didn't know what cases were. I didn't. You probably still say I didn't dress properly. I know when I walked into the office, they literally said, are you here to order the lunch? Because the lunch isn't till 2 o'clock. They thought I was coming in to do a food order. So what I mean by type 1 and type 2 is you get stereotypes, is what I would say. And I think it is for sure the case that we make a lot of the errors where people would have been good. They may not fit all of the exact criteria we're looking for, but they meet other criteria. And what we're trying to do now is have a much more broader way. One of the things I'm pushing our recruiting to do this year is I want to hire 5 people with no university degree this year. No university degree. Because there are very, very talented leaders that have no, and I know that's not a great thing to say to you guys, but it's only 5.
But they can quit. They can quit.
You can quit. Don't quit. You crazy?
Then they would probably increase their chances to get a job.
No. But I think the notion is having a much broader perspective, because I think this gets to the point on McKinsey. We have to take our own medicine. So again, we love to tell clients that in government, you need to change, you need to do it. And then we're 90 years and I'm looking, how much have we changed? How much have we changed in terms of how we serve our clients, the people, the type of experiences that we give people? We have to be moving that at pace. And so what we're looking for is, at the end of the day, the thing we're looking for are leaders. They're people that actually want to make a difference, and it can be in any dimension. We don't care where it is, but you want to make a dent in the world in a positive way, hopefully. And that's what we're looking for, right? Not people who want to meet the criteria. And I think sometimes we focus too much on people that are meeting a criteria, not what they want. I remember I did a lot of learning about this at West Point, and there was a fellow from Yale University there talking to the plebe class. This is the new class that was coming in, and basically said to the group, to get into Yale now, the number of extracurricular activities you have to have besides good marks has gone up from 3 to 13, right? And people know that that's, excuse my language, it's BS. People they aren't doing that because they want to do it. They're doing it because it's good to look like you've got a lot of extracurricular, because then you look like an interesting person, and you design your CV. So this guy was saying to the class, the plebe class, he says, do you want to be led into battle by someone with 13 extracurricular activities, or do you want to be led by someone who's a leader, right? And what we're here to do is find leaders. They're again, people that want to drive. So it's leadership, it's building teams. It's actually more the soft skills. Because my view, anyone here, I know, and I really mean this, would be successful at McKinsey. I'm not worried. I know that. The question is, it gets to character. And what I worry about is our interviews have been too focused on the academics, the extracurricular activities. Tell me a tough situation you were in. We can read it on the internet. We know what so I think what we have to get more into is looking for leaders, people that, what is it that you're actually trying to do? How do you work with other people? I look for a lot of things like, does the person say I or we? It's a minor thing, but sometimes you hear people and they go, I did this and I did that and then I did this and this, and at some point you just go, I don't want to hear it because it's about, are you selfish or are you, and you can feel it. And I used to lead our recruiting, and what I always noticed was it was the character actually that was more important, but our recruiting process doesn't, I think, get at that enough. That's a criticism, I think, of work, and that's why we miss out on people like you. That's my story.
It's great to hear that you hire 5 non-academics.
We also hire older people too now, just by the way. I just want to say that. That's what we're doing.
Excellent.
We broadened our minds.
You made my day. You made my day. So another question around McKinsey, and if I may, I also talk about also some bad stories within your history, your great history at McKinsey. Though there was this Gallen scandal. The Gallen scandal is something where actually your predecessor, or one of your predecessors, Rajat Gupta, as global managing partner, was sentenced for 2 years into prison because of insider trading. And that was actually during your period as being a global managing partner that this sentence was set, and it was a shock for McKinsey.
Yeah.
It was a real shock, insider trading from the top guy that is not in line with your values and with the trust that you try to bring across to your clients, right?
Yeah.
So how did you deal with that to that time? What did that mean for you personally, and what did you do with it?
It was first of all, it was very tough, but probably more important, it was more embarrassing or humiliating. I mean, it really shook the firm to its core. Because, by the way, not to go on about it, it wasn't just Rajat Gupta. There was another senior partner who was also indicted, so there were 2. And they were sort of related in what they were doing. But the fact is, it was devastating because, as you said, values are what we all... I think that's what actually motivates a lot of people, doing the right thing. You're serving client first. I mean, insider trading is the exact opposite of that. It's selfish. It's doing it for your. It's just I don't need to go on about it. So I just say acknowledge that it was a very, very bad period. And on a personal level, I had just been elected managing director. It was in January of 2009. And the world was actually going into a crisis. And like other organizations, McKinsey's affected too. I used to think, when things are really tough or really bad in the economic cycle, we'd be fine, because when it's bad, people, well, you know what, it was really bad, people just freeze, they stop. So we were in a very tough economic condition, not desperate, but it was tough. We had to take our own medicine. We did cost reduction. We stopped flying. We did the only thing we didn't change was training, recruiting, training, and on the people side. And basically what it meant is partners had to absorb the cost. You're gonna get paid less but the problem was I was coming in, so this was I'm telling you the story because of just more what happened. It was in June is when so I was elected in January. They give you sort of 6 months to get used to, because you're not really prepared. In June I took over, and actually I'm being very open with you, we have a thing called additional award, which is the overall profit above everything else that's shared amongst the partners. It's usually positive, right? Well, it was negative. And my CFO, who's a very good friend of mine, and I picked him because he's tough with me, he would call me every month after June, and he goes, Dom, you're the first managing director in McKinsey history who's had negative AA for a month, and then the second month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. I said, Tom, I'm getting tired of the phone call. Could you just call? But we were doing a lot, but it was tough, right? It was and we were having to it was good learning because we had to take our own medicine.
Yes.
And then literally at the end of October, we were just coming out. I could feel there was momentum. We were moving. And then I was in Spain visiting clients, and I got this phone call from one of my colleagues who's on our operating committee, who's in charge of people, and she said, Dom, someone has been arrested, but we don't know why. And I'm going, the two reasons are bad. I said, one is terrorism, or the other is insider trading. And I said, is there not a third reason you could come up with? And they said, no. And we don't know. And that weekend, just as we were coming out, that's when Anil Kumar was arrested. And that was just people were just shocked. And then about 6 months later, Rajat. So that became the focus of what we were for about a year and a half, because it was, people were very upset, obviously. Yeah. We also had to do introspection. What went wrong? Why did the number one person, in a way, do? It wasn't even as though I could say it was a person in office services that did it. It was the managing partner who did this. Yeah. So anyhow, I go on to say what it made us do is reevaluate everything. We brought in advisors. I had Daniel Ariely, we had Daniel Ariely come in from Duke, who writes not very motivating books called Why Do Humans Cheat? That was his bestseller. So he came in, Nitin Noria from Harvard, and we just to look at values and what went wrong and closed file, what did we do, what didn't, and so we put everything on the table.
Interesting.
Probably the worst meeting I had was with our alumni, and that was in June of 2010. So I'm meeting all of the senior people who'd retired. Some of them are 95 years old, and they were angry, is the understatement. And it was almost, don't want to say anything about, I wasn't the one causing the problem, but in a sense, you become the focal point. And it was literally, I said, I feel like the 16-year-old that was given the car keys one night and went out and drove the car off into a ditch and totally totaled it. Now I'm seeing my parents. That's what it felt like. And they were angry, right, about what are you going to do? So it was, I guess I'm just saying, it was a very traumatic time. But what happens, I think, this is where you learn. If you just say, we have a lot of amazing elements about what we do and the people and where we are, and kind of the group, everyone said, let's be 5 times better than we were. And that became the focus. But it made us, we better learn, we better realize we're fallible. I hope we became less arrogant. One thing that's always bothered me is McKinsey's been a little bit arrogant, or maybe, and I think that's outrageous. That we have I think that was a good, massive slap in the head to say, you know what, how don't you dare talk to people as though when you've done something like that. So I think it actually, in retrospect, now has been very healthy, good for the culture. I would not recommend doing that, to do that, but I'm saying I think it.
And you took your lessons. I mean, I think this was remarkable. You started to do online tutorials for all partners and consultants. They have to do online tutorials on ethical questions.
Yeah.
And then there were a lot of criticisms to you. I read that some people said you introduced a nanny state.
Yeah.
And one guy even said, if I may quote him, he said, "You remind me on Eastern Germany when the Stasi was checking."
That's right. It's not that funny, but I do remember him
saying.
I remember.
That's tough, right? But you put that through.
Well, one thing was, we can't trade stock. You can't. I mean, we work with so many institutions around the world. Even what the definition of insider trading is, even if you work with an organization that you can't trade in a competitor's stock because so basically it means you don't participate in that side. And for some people that upset because they said that's what we do. There are very strict rules with your family. And that's what and then as you said, these tests which people didn't like because we literally said you have to do these tests on a regular basis. We have to do the training. Yeah, so people didn't like that.
Great. And now they're doing these tutorials? I heard that you closed the email, you shut down the emails if they don't finish?
Shut down emails. We also fired people. I mean, the other thing we do, and this is, I don't want to go into the dark alleys here on McKinsey. I hope McKinsey is actually a good place. I don't want to give you, but we have a group called the Professional Standards Committee, and because one of the things we wanted to do is make sure if people see something that's not going right, that you have a place to say it.
Yeah.
And that group, reviews what especially senior people are doing. And, what I do every year, unfortunately, we fire people each year for people who've done something, wrong. It's expense, fiddling, sexual harassment. I mean, this is humanity, right? And what we do is I publish what they are, which isn't a very nice thing to do, but you learn that way and I think so those are some of the things we've had to do to make sure that we're extreme on that, to make sure we keep that, because we just cannot simply afford to have anything like that happen.
Thank you very much for this open words. This brings me to the last chapter of my question, the Dominic Barton, your beliefs, your values, and actually you said, you installed a value system, you installed some tutorials, and you are a son of a missionary, right? Your father was religious, and how much influence that value orientation of your father, your personal career and your orientation in life?
I think it had a lot more than I first thought, because not to again bore you with details, but my dad was a pretty adamant, church leader, so we would, have every morning prayers. And after I was about 11 years old, I was literally tired of this. Like I was like, why do we say the same thing? We know what's the point? It literally was to the point where it was too much for me. You know what I mean? But he did. But there are many things that were done that, from a values point of view, we would always have, for example, homeless people staying with us, and it used to drive me crazy because he all of a sudden 3 people would come and live in our place, and they usually room in my room, which I didn't find that pleasant at the time. But I remember at the time why, and there were things, and we didn't have very much money. I remember at the time, and he said, are you a giver or a taker? We're givers, not takers. We have something, we're going to give. So there are many things now that I didn't actually enjoy that I now think about that actually made sense. So even, I remember this thing about every morning, it would be like this thing called the Book of Common Prayer. My dad's not a zealot or Tea Party type guy or anything. And it was to remind you. He says, I do this to remind myself of what I'm doing because we're humans and you can go off course. And this goes back to values. That's why it's good to have Values Day, and it's good to talk about what they mean and on a regular basis so that it isn't just something on the wall. So he had a lot, also being global. I was born in Uganda, so that I was always been interested, if you will, in Africa or emerging markets, and I think there's a notion of selflessness that he just you're here to serve people, not don't take your, as soon as you start taking yourself too seriously, it'll go pear-shaped. So that probably is more the way he influenced me, and probably more, it's strange, I never really spent a lot of time with him because we actually had conflicts, because I was disruptive with my brother and sister, because I really couldn't take some of this. I was like, I'm out of here, I'm not gonna, I go into my, but now he's about 86, 87, I probably see him very often now just together. Like I've sort of, it's taken me too long, but I've come to appreciate him, if you will, toward the end of his life.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, my second last question would be, we talked about my setbacks, now we talk about your setbacks, huh? You will not imagine, but Dominic also had some setbacks, and one is public, and I read that you have been, it took you 3 times to be elected as partner of McKinsey. Yeah. And that was a very tough time in your career, you told me, and you said, and I read that you were about to quit. Yeah. And you had intensive discussions, if this is the right job, if this is the right firm you're working. Can you tell us a little bit about this period and what you learned from that, and what can we learn out of this?
Well, I'd been in the Toronto office, and I loved what I was doing. I thought I sort of, the notion of do you run to work is a sort of a sign of do you like, work wasn't really work, it was a passion, so I loved it. And and when you think you're doing well and you love it, the first time I was put up for partner was a bit early, and the office is saying, look, there may be a chance for you to be elected early because you're doing well, and why not give it a shot? Yeah. And this is about the 5-year mark, and the feedback came back very brutal, like you are so far off, like it's, and we probably shouldn't have put you up early because it's actually made people nervous that you've got some gaps. So that was a bit of a, going like this to like that, and I wasn't really sure what to do, but I thought, it was early, so I could handle it. Okay. And then the second time, it was a year later, the feedback came back. I could tell because when people came in, and most people at McKinsey are very open and talk, but this time it was maybe because of everyone thought I was doing well, they wouldn't look at me. Like I could tell something was wrong. They just sort of walked by, and I was going, well, that person was in the committee. They probably would have told me. They wouldn't say anything. And then I sat down with my group leader, who's one of my closest friends today. He's a Singaporean guy, and he doesn't have the most, wonderful style of giving feedback, right? And he's saying, Dominic, Dom, I've got to give you some feedback. I said, okay. He goes, it's very bad. And I went, okay, how bad? Really bad. And I went, okay, well, he goes, no point in even going into the detail. And I sort of went, okay, so what should we do? And he goes, how about we talk again tomorrow? Because he just couldn't, that was my first, and I didn't know what, I went home. I remember I told my wife, she goes, how was things? I said, I don't think they're very good. And she goes, well, what happened? I said, I don't know. I think it's so bad, I don't know. And anyhow, so we went through, and I finally got the feedback, and it was there was a worry that I wasn't a very good problem solver, which in McKinsey is like saying if you're a math professor, someone says you can't add. That's what it would be. It was, so I was going, well, that's a pretty serious. It's not your style could be a little nicer. It's you can't problem solve. So I said, well, what do I do? And I said, we really don't know. And I said, and I loved the job. Like at that point, I was ready to go. Bugger it, I'm going to go do something. I can't, but I actually really liked what I was doing. And so to cut a long story short, I sort of found out more about what I needed to do, and they said, do you want to try again? I mean, it's a low probability, but if you want to, we're willing to try and help you, because, we know you like it, and we see something. We're not, you've got big gaps here. And I want to do it. And it was my wife basically didn't, without telling me, and I love her for this, she went to the office manager without telling, said, I want to have a breakfast meeting, and said, his name's Ron Farmer, and said, Dom, he's a pretty persistent sort of a person, so you got to tell me, is this going to work or not? Because if it's not, we got to stop it, because he will keep hitting his head against the wall, like he will not stop. So just tell me, and I'll sort him.
Okay.
And I never knew this until about 2 years after I was actually elected.
That's nice.
But she was worried because I was very stressed. And even I remember my father-in-law at the time was a very successful business person saying, Dominic, well, maybe you're not cut out for business. That's I was like, wow. Whoa.
Tough feedback, huh?
And they don't have anywhere else to go, right, if it's your family. And they were supportive, but they were just saying maybe it doesn't work, you know what I mean? And that was, and then I had 2 other senior partners who helped me. They kind of stepped in and said, Dominic, I see something here. I want you to help in this particular project, and it went really well. And then I was elected on the 3rd time, but as I said, I think I had splinters in my back from going over the bar, just barely made it.
Okay.
But I remember at the time, and the other part I would just say that was also, this is more about just not feeling great. One of my very best friends in the world, he joined McKinsey a year after me, and he was elected that 2nd time. I wasn't. At the time, McKinsey doesn't actually care about time frames anymore. We used to. Now we're saying it doesn't matter, but at the time, people would look at that. And this friend of mine joined a year later, but basically was elected a year earlier, but he wanted me to do his celebration speech. It was a Christmas. And it was really embarrassing because what I could tell, I was like in a group like this, and what people were looking at was they weren't looking, they were going, God, this is embarrassing. This guy, he didn't get elected, and what a loop. Like it was awkward. Do you know what I mean? It was, yeah. And my friend was he thought this was great, and I love him to this day, but I was just going, I didn't like this. Yeah. Anyhow, but what ended up happening was I finally got elected, but what it did in a strange way is it released me.
Yeah.
Because then I decided I'm never going to go through that again, like where I basically said, you know what, I'm going to have my own standard of what I do, and if it doesn't work in McKinsey, I'm fine with that. I've got other things to do. And in a sense, it gave me the courage of the courage of a dead man. I mean, you can't kill me because I'm already dead, so I'm going to, and it made me do things that a lot of people would say, you're crazy. Like again, when I went to Korea, people said, why are you going there? There's no clients, you don't speak the language. Things were going really well, and I had a lot of clients that I was working with. I was doing a lot with the government. Why would you leave? Why would you throw that away and go to a place where you don't know? And I said, because I know I'm going to learn more than I ever have before. And you know what? If it doesn't work, too bad. What, are you going to cry? Am I going to cry? It gave me and that's a good thing, yeah. I think. And I wouldn't recommend going through that process. I think you can have the courage of a dead man without having to go through that. But for me, it's been a source of energy, resilience.
Thank you very much, Dominic. I quit my last question to give some room for questions for you. Can you perhaps always say your name before you start raising your question?
Is it on?
Yeah, perfect.
Nice. Okay, my name is Daniel Schmidt. First of all, thank you for coming. I'm a big fan, so please excuse the critical question, which is McKinsey talks a lot about working on the toughest problems in the world, yet we have climate change, which is a huge problem in this century, and it seems that McKinsey is on the wrong side of it, because you're flying a lot, you're doing a lot.
It's true.
I am. A big, not only you, but the firm. So I just wanted to ask you what you think you can do about it, and if you may, I know your system is very much so that you have to be with the client. So maybe don't go in that direction, but rather go in what you can do to offset, this impact.
It's a good question. I mean, on climate change, I actually believe we're doing a lot. I would beg to differ. If you think about the carbon cost curve, which is the methodology that's being used to figure out the ways that we actually figure out how to reduce the 2 degrees on a very practical basis. That's the tool that was developed, all right, by McKinsey. President Calderon in Mexico, when he did the G20 meeting, he forbid anyone from doing PowerPoint, literally all these presidents and prime ministers, but he said, because I'm the host, I get to put up my own page. The page he put up was the carbon cost curve. I'm just saying, just to give the significance of where that is. The COP21, COP22, we were very much in the organizing group for the Marrakesh session that just happened last week. We're very much into that. And it's a very vibrant practice. We call it sustainable resource productivity because it's everything, right, in terms of what we do with our clients. So it's an important practice, and I think we're making contributions on that side. I think at a personal level, you're right, we travel a lot. I probably travel I think it's 1.3 million miles a year. What I do is that my daughter is a very strong greenie, and I can just tell you something that I've made there is a lot of forest land in Canada that exists now because of me, which is my offset, seriously, to do it. So I think in McKinsey we do, the other thing I would just say is, one thing we're trying to push towards with clients do want to see us, but they don't have to see us physically. We can do a lot with technology, and we do a lot that way. The other thing is you don't always have to be at the client site all the time. This is even from a lifestyle point of view. It's not even from a climate change point of view. And this is something that we're doing much more of, where you can work from home, and you're using the technology. I mean, the number of meetings we have now by a video is extraordinary. But that said, I do admit I fly a lot and burn a lot of carbon.
Is there any chance that McKinsey as a firm does the same thing as you and goes like carbon neutral by buying the first land?
We do. I mean, we actually do look at our carbon footprint, and we do do offsets on that side. And it also relates a bit to the work, the donations we make to work. If you look at a lot of the climate change, climate works organizations, you will see a lot of McKinsey people in that. So we try our best to do it. The travel, we suck at it, to be very blunt with you. I don't know, and until we can figure out how to teleport people, or I don't know what to do on it, but other than do offsets.
Can we, I have some short questions, short answers to get
good
a
feedback.
lot of people here in the room?
Maybe we take a bunch of questions, and then, is that all right?
Yeah,
take 3 or 4?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Can you do that? Can you handle it, Dominic?
I'll try.
Sure.
You try and keep me.
I help you. Okay, first question.
Okay. Hi, my name is Tisha, and I grew up in Switzerland and China, and I think the factors you have pointed out all lead to an exacerbating trend, which is a rise in inequality.
Yeah.
And at least from the perspective of a naive student, I think that's also because of the fact that there are not many connection points between business and society and the public sector. And I think for our students, a lot of us are willing to take the risk, and it is also our project to create more inclusive business models. So especially, what advice would you give to students who are striving to become leaders in business, or I don't know, but with an impact in the societal space, in the public sector or social sector? And also, what advice would you give for students who are willing to take the risk, but do not see through the situation at that point, and even though they're willing to think out of the box? And
okay. That's a lot already.
It's a good, yeah. Let me a couple more.
Yeah, two or three more.
My name is Alicia, and I just wanted to know, before you were talking a lot about Asia, you also mentioned Africa, but how do you assess the potential in relation to disruption in South America?
Okay, third question. Yep.
Dear Mr. Barton, thanks for all the insights you've shared with us. My name is Chris. I'm in the last semester of my master's here at HSG at the University of St. Gallen. What I wanted...
Chris, huh?
Yeah.
What I wanted...
It's an application speech.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thanks, guys. What I really wanted to know is, you've quickly mentioned that also the consulting industry will be disrupted. Could you maybe go more into the detail? Who will be the players? How will it be disrupted? And secondly, what would be your main career advice for somebody who will start working soon?
Okay.
Good.
Good enough.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I agree with you. The rising inequality will be one of the biggest dilemmas. It's, to me, one of the big implications of this. The dilemma of disruption is rising inequality. I do think as business leaders, you have to think about the society in which you operate. You can't just think about shareholder value. So, and by Adam Smith, in his very first book called The Theory of Moral Sentiment, said it's the duty of the entrepreneur to take care of the society in which they operate. So that comes from Adam Smith. That's a bit of a broad-minded view, right? So I do think when you think about whatever business it is that you want to build, what do you do to the community in which you're operating? How are you helping, right? Not just with employees, but with the climate change, with the resources that you use. How do you participate in government? I think there's a lot that can be done. It will be expected, I think. You're going to see investing firms expecting companies to be more broad-minded and have the trust of the society in which they're in. So that's what I would just say is I think it has to be, it's not someone else's job. Business has to step up. And that's why I used that Randall Stevenson example as just one minor example who took care of the employees. I'm gonna just switch to...
Yes, please.
South America, that's a good call out. I shouldn't have forgotten about South America. It's an important part of the world, but it's not, in terms of its population and economic mass, it just doesn't have the same weight. It doesn't mean it's not an important area in where it is. And I think the two countries in particular that have a lot of will have even more economic power are Brazil and Argentina. And I'm hoping that Argentina has come out of like a 75-year sleep, right? Argentina was one of the countries with 4 others that was seen as the 20th century would be Argentina's century. But through bad governance, we never got there. Are you from South America, by the way? Or you? No. Swiss, okay, yeah, that's good, yeah. Okay.
Close.
Hope you visit there at some point. But I do think it's an important part of the world. I'm just saying in terms of the weight of where things are. It's probably more in Africa and Asia. And on the consulting industry, I mean, we are, again, taking our own medicine. Our profession is getting disrupted. It's consolidating. You've seen a lot of smaller players disappear. Monitor, 80 Little, there's Arthur D. Little. There was a whole bunch of firms when I joined that are gone. I can think of probably 15, because you need scale. You actually do need scale. When clients want to work with you, they want to know that you can bring every functional capability, marketing, organization, the mindset. They can't have 15 different groups doing it. They need one group with a similar set of values. And often if they're a global company, they have a global footprint, they want you to be everywhere, right? So when we do work with a pharma company, they want to know that we can work in 65 countries like that, and there are people that believe in our values or trained like us. They can go anywhere. So consolidation is key, and that's happening, and I think we're going to see fewer. I think we could end up with 2, right, that are there. But another change is the disruption outside of our traditional profession, and this is where the data analytics, the Palantirs, the machine learning side of they're moving in. I was very worried about Palantir about 3 years ago. People know about Palantir, right? But it's something that I'm now not as worried, because you have to know a lot. You can't just do the mathematics and you have to also understand how to translate that into business. But that's so we're being disrupted that way, and that's why we are hiring, as you said, let's say 2,500 people, but we've also hired last year 1,000 data analysts. These are PhDs in mathematics, right? Because we have a very large data analytics group. We're also having to hire people in design. We're now the 2nd largest design firm in the world, right? Because we have to develop products and services for clients that actually look good. They don't. Often McKinsey people, when we talk about stuff and you designed it, you wouldn't want to buy it. So we need to figure out how to shape that properly and where we work it. So those are some of the changes. And then on the people, who are the people that we bring in? How do we train people? So it's a lot of, I'm excited because I think the impact we can have and where we're moving could be at a totally different scale than we've ever had before. But that's the kind of place you're moving into. So if you like innovating, or you challenge orthodoxies and you want to but you're focused on wanting to make a difference with clients, I can't think of a better time.
I would suggest one last question, because we're running out of time, unfortunately. Dominic, you choose?
Why don't we take 3 quick ones?
Three.
Is that all right?
Okay.
I know I'm going to get shot. 3, and then I'll try and be
okay,
brief.
3.
Okay, yeah, 1,
3.
2, 3, yeah.
Hello, does this work? Yeah. Hi, Dominic, great.
Oh, that was, maybe it's 4 now. Okay, go, yep.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Fantastic discussion, thank you very much. I'm interested, I looked at a list this morning of Switzerland's mid-sized companies, and I was amazed to see that the top 500 businesses in Switzerland generate 1.2 trillion francs in revenue. So I'm interested to get your perspective on the size of the opportunity that still remains for these companies in Asia, and with the rise of Asia in India and in China.
Excellent. First question, thank you. Second one.
On here.
Hello, my name is Dennis. I'm from China. I'm a PhD student here. I have 2 questions actually regarding the leadership. First is about your point of shift of power to Asia. So I want to say that I agree with the shift of power, economic power to China, if that's what you are referring to. I also agree that quite agree that the political shift is also going on, but I'm not quite sure about the shift of the soft power. Probably we can talk about the movie Kung Fu Panda, but it's not a Chinese movie, it's made in Hollywood. So what would you really advise the Chinese leaders, how they could really fill the world leadership vacuum, especially after the election of Mr. Donald Trump? And my second question is to you. So in your view, how do you develop your own leadership? And what matters more for you to be appointed as the global partner of McKinsey? It's more because of your experiences in various markets, or it's more because of your resilience of recovering from your setbacks? That's my question. Thank you.
Yep, great.
Thank you.
Maybe one more here, and then that's...
One more here. Front row.
Thank you. So my name is Matt. My question is, if I recall correctly, you are approaching your end term as a managing partner next year, right? Yeah. So what are the 3 things that you would be like to be remembered for as your legacy?
Wow, these are
big question at the end.
You guys are, yeah. Okay. Quickly on the 1.2 trillion francs notion, I think that there's massive opportunities for Swiss firms. I think a lot of the big Swiss organizations are already there. I mean, if I just think about the UBS probably has the biggest private banking system of any of the Asian players in Asia, right? And if I could go on the banking side, I could go on the on the technology side, on the pharma side. I think what the more interesting opportunities is maybe back to SMEs, is what you said. There's such phenomenally technically good companies, many of them family-owned, that can now connect to a network. If you connect up to the Alibaba system or Taobao, or you connect up to Tencent system in China, a small Swiss company can get access to a very huge market. It's beginning, and this is where I think there's wonderful opportunities for Swiss small companies to participate in the system, and I hope that's something that's being encouraged or looked at. We're seeing it in Italy, this has been happening, in Canada, this has been happening, in Malaysia, SMEs kind of attaching, so there's tons of growth opportunity. Just one other thing I'd say, just the size of the growth opportunity, we need to build, just on large companies, 76 Nestle's need to be built over the next 25 years in Asia just to meet the demand of the new consumers. That's kind of just to give you a sense of the growth. It's not amazing like it is in North America or Europe, where we're anemic on growth. There's lots. So I think a big opportunity. On the shift, I think, and by the way, I don't think it's just China, right? China plays a very important role, but it's India as well. And I also said Indonesia. Indonesia is the sleeper. A lot of people don't think a lot about Indonesia, but you 240 million people growing at a 6% rate for the last 10 years, doing transit. That's another one country I would look at. But to your point, I think on the economic power, I think, is definitely shifting there. I think the political power will shift. I do think the Donald Trump thing won't help, because you're going to see other Asian countries moving around. People are going to be looking for a new way. The AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Bank, the new development bank that's been set up, these are I think they're wonderful. They're kind of like a new Bretton Woods, which is China's doing. But I think, to your point, the soft power is very weak. And I see this in acquisitions of Chinese companies going abroad. It's a fairly rough process. And it's not because the Chinese CEOs are rough, they're just not familiar with the issues that are going on, and how when you acquire a company, people get nervous about, are you trying to take the jobs? A lot of these Chinese companies are actually using it as a platform to go broader, to actually increase. But there's the soft power side is not there. And the one thing I think, one of the biggest economic opportunities in the world is entertainment in China and in India. I mean, China has 5,000 years of history. How many people here can name 3 Chinese novels that they've read? That has been in English? Can anyone who's not from China? But see, that is a culture, a 5,000-year culture that's got amazing stories that need to be, again, if I was Walt Disney, or I would be shifting my headquarters in there with historians and drawing out, because the stories, the movies, it's going to happen. And I think that will help with the soft power, I think, when people see them.
Your legacy.
Legacy, boy, that's yeah. You know, in some ways I sort of say you have to almost ask other people what they would think. But I would say I'd probably say 3 things. One is innovation, I hope, because what I've tried to do, and I'm probably not doing it as fast as I could or as well as I could, is to disrupt ourselves. So we've had, in the last 5 years, 40% of what we do today didn't exist 5 years ago. It just didn't exist. I don't know whether that's fast enough or not, but I can tell you we didn't wait for someone to tell us to do it. So we are challenging every single orthodoxy except our values and client first. But everything else is on the table, everything. And that, I hope, will be a legacy of innovation, that we challenge ourselves, and we take our own medicine, and I think we actually even relate more to our clients. The number of startups that we're doing in McKinsey, right now, we have 750 startups that are going on. Literally, they're just startups where capital is being put into them, and how we do it, because that's what our clients want. We're building businesses for clients. Some of the biggest clients in the world have literally said, you build this Internet of Things business for us. It's a McKinsey person running it. We hire the people, and then we sell it back to them, if I might call it that. So innovation is a very important one. Second is, I hope values, just because of what we went through, that we've anchored it down, that we're more resilient. I get nervous about saying that because we're a human firm and we make mistakes, but I really hope we put a modern day version of that into the into the system. And the third is, it's more about playing a role in the world. I mean, we're involved in a lot of topics that we never used to be involved in, but I think we need to as a good social citizen. So we were involved in the Ebola situation, helping turn that around. We've helped get rid of polio in Africa. We're dealing with youth unemployment. We're very heavily focused on women, right? About the unfairness and the role that women are not playing their role in society, and trying to take our own medicine on that too, by the way. So a societal role. So those would probably be the 3 things. But you should probably ask someone else. They may have different. They may say, this guy's a jerk. That's his first, or whatever. I don't know. But that's what I hope it is.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Dominic. At the end, I would make it very brief. 2 things. I think the best, to be honest, I I thought I prepare for 1 hour for this moderation. And then I started to prepare, and it was so interesting that I read a lot about you, a lot about what you wrote, actually. Saw some clips at YouTube and everywhere, and I was really impressed, and I ended up 2 days just preparing for this moderation because it was just interesting. You're a very impressive and interesting person to talk to. At the end, my wife said, you know more about Dominic than about me. Huh? But
do you want to do some marriage counseling up here? We do it. Yeah.
But it was really interesting, and I think you could show that today as well. And I think the best compliment is the audience. I tell you, we are heavily over time, but nobody went out of this room. I promise you they will vote with their feet if they don't like it. And I think that's the best compliment. You really made a very personal and insightful session. Thank you very much, Dominic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It was very nice of you. Yeah. Thank you.